Hello again, Exiles. It's been a few weeks since my last upload. I took a little break from Path of Exile 2 after spending over 600 hours and fully completing the game to play a couple other games and refresh a bit. Now I'm feeling the itch again and have a few things I want to talk about. By the way, if you want to stay in touch with me and our community, I definitely recommend joining our community Discord, where there is daily conversation taking place about both PoE 2 and some variety gaming as well. There is a link to it in the description below. In today's video, I want to discuss a few core problems with Path of Exile 2's Endgame and some of the changes that I personally hope GGG are considering for the 0.2.0 patch, which we just got a timeline for and should be expecting around a month from now. These are just my opinions, and I hope to create lots of constructive conversation in the comments of this video. So if you agree or disagree with anything that I say, let me know down below. I have chaptered out the video so that you, the viewer, can skip around and watch the sections that specifically interest you, if you would like to do so. But obviously, I recommend just watching it start to finish. Also, if you enjoy this kind of content, I would really appreciate it if you hit the thumbs up and like the video. The topics I plan on talking about today are endgame mapping, player power, league mechanic passive trees, crafting, and some obvious new content that we are all hoping for. Now, without further ado, let us get started with my favorite topic to discuss, the endgame mapping systems. The endgame mapping experience needs a lot of love, so I really hope GGG consider some of the changes that I'm about to bring up. The first one being fixing map completion. I think GGG should either show us where all the rares are immediately upon entering the map and leave further exploration for league mechanics or strongboxes up to the player, or just change map completion from killing all rares to killing a certain percent of the monsters on the map. This way, the direction you need to move towards upon entering a map would be much clearer, and you would never be required to backtrack, which is one of the biggest pains when it comes to mapping in its current state, especially on the unfun map layouts. Next up, GGG should give us some control of where our precursor tablet mechanics land. This could be implemented in a couple different ways, but my favorite example of how to add this would be, as you progress your Arbiter of Ash bossing passive tree, you unlock favored map slots. 1 slot per Arbiter tier, so a maximum of 4. Each favored map slot allows you to manually choose one map when you put a precursor tablet into the tower. This way you can manually select a few maps each time and either choose to stack your mechanics on top of each other, make a path of mechanics to the next tower, eliminating any empty dead maps, or in some situations, both. Next up, GGG really needs to fix Atlas dead ends. Nobody likes it when the flow of mapping is interrupted by a strange, unnatural dead end. This clearly has something to do with the technology being used to randomly generate the Atlas. I'm not a game developer, so I'm not sure on the specifics of fixing this, but there must be some adjustments that can be made or some math somewhere that would eliminate this from happening. Now for a change, I would absolutely love to see add an item that lets you skip a map completely. There should be an item in the game that you can place into the Atlas with a waystone, and it allows you to completely skip over a map node. The map would count as completed, but you would get no rewards other than being able to move past it immediately. This way, if you get stuck in a situation where the only way forward is traversing through a map that you don't like, then you can use this item to skip over it, instead of having an unfun experience. However, this item does need to be rare enough or balanced in a way that stops people from buying hundreds of them and then using them to traverse around a citadels instantly. They are meant to be used as a method to avoid negative experiences, not speedrun the end game. Finally, I'd like to see GGG add waystones augmented with other league mechanics, similar to how a waystone can be augmented to have delirium. Having the ability to augment or pick up waystones with mechanics attached to them would solve the issue with having blank dead maps that you have to traverse over. Instead of having an empty white map you have to clear, for example, you could use a breach waystone that you picked up during a breach you were clearing, and maybe even distill delirium onto it. Now, instead of having a dead, empty map, you have a delirious breach map instead. Now, with the endgame mapping chat wrapped up, let's talk about another hot topic: player power. Alright, it's incredibly obvious that GGG needs to nerf the top end of player power and buff the lower end of playstyles that are struggling. So I don't have much to add there. But what I would like to do is remind everyone that we paid to beta test this game. That is what early access entails. So if we want this game to be perfect when it finally has a full free-to-play launch, then we have to be okay with GGG nerfing and buffing things in the middle of a quote-unquote league. GGG has said that they want an economy reset every 3 to 4 months. And if we expect for the economy resets to be the only time they make changes to player power, and we expect the game to be ready in 12 months, that means we are only giving them 3 to 4 opportunities at making changes to player power and getting it right by the end of it. That is just super unrealistic. GGG needs to be comfortable making changes to player power as problems arise. Insanely overpowered, game-breaking builds need to be nerfed as soon as they are discovered. We are all beta testers after all, and if you find builds that are insanely OP online, you should consider the fact that they might be nerfed very soon instead of having the confidence that you can abuse them for the next 3 months. I think a large reason GGG overreacted to the initial negative response they got from many players after their first round of nerfs at the start of early access was because back then, the cost to respec all your passives was very high. Now that the cost has been lowered, GGG need to revisit this and get their nerf guns back out. I don't have much else to add to this topic, so let's continue and begin our talk about the League mechanic Atlas passive trees. In Path of Exile 2's current state, you must interact with the League mechanics Breach, Delirium, Expedition, and Ritual in order to collect boss fight tokens, which eventually allow you to fight against the mechanic's corresponding pinnacle boss fight encounter. If you defeat this pinnacle boss, then you are rewarded with 2 passive points to invest into the corresponding mechanic's Atlas passive tree. I think that Breach and Delirium both have a very clear-cut way of how this works. You do the mechanic, you get splinters, you collect enough splinters, and then they combine into a boss fight token. Then you go fight the boss, and the more times you kill the pinnacle boss, the better the mechanic gets for you. Now, Ritual and Expedition, on the other hand, are on the complete opposite side of the spectrum. In Expedition, at least getting logbook drops can be manipulated by using your explosives correctly over a long period of time. However, once you start using your logbooks, it is completely RNG whether or not the boss will spawn inside of them, which means your Expedition passive progression is locked behind something that is completely RNG. Now that's bad, but the RNG for Expedition isn't horrible. It's certainly nowhere near as horrible as Ritual. In order to fight the Ritual Pinnacle boss, you need to find an audience with the king inside of one of your rituals, which is completely RNG based. And it's not good RNG either. I ran so many rituals in my first 300 hours and never found a single audience until I saved up the currency to buy 3 of them so I could invest 6 points into the ritual passive tree, and then I started seeing audiences inside my rituals. The main problem here is that Expedition and Ritual have an RNG factor that dictates whether or not you get to progress your passive tree for that mechanic. I've thought up of a way to fix this for both of them. For Expedition, I think that the boss should just stop spawning inside of logbooks, and instead, when you are clearing a logbook, you will get fragments similar to Breach or Simulacrum splinters that build into a boss token that you can then use at the Realm Gate, and it takes you to fight Olroth. This fixes 2 problems at once, actually, because now clearing the logbooks actually becomes important, and it removes the RNG from whether or not you get to fight the boss. For Ritual, I have 2 solutions. The first is that there could just be ritual splinters that drop at the base of the ritual altars after each one is completed, that is similar to the other mechanics and builds into a boss token that you can then use at the realm gate. Or just make it so that every time you don't see an audience with the king, it increases the chances of you seeing one next time. So eventually, you would have a 100% chance of getting an audience in your next ritual. That's all I have to say about fixing the League Mechanic Atlas passives. So now let's talk about crafting. It's no secret that the majority of the player base is unhappy with the current state of crafting in Path of Exile 2. I do think, though, as a community, we need to keep in mind that this is the most basic form of crafting the game will ever have, and new crafting mechanics will be added regularly with the big content patches that come paired with economy resets. So the question is this a good base crafting system to build upon for the future? That's a hard question to answer since we don't really know what GGG is cooking. However, in my opinion, I think it is close to what we want. It's just not perfect. Personally, I don't particularly care for always having to find or buy new item bases to craft on. I'd much rather find my item base and then be able to craft on it over and over until I hit what I want. This is something that GGG changed from PoE 1, and I'm not really sure why. In short, I'd love for a version of Scouring Orbs to be reintroduced to the game so that if my item bricks, I can scour it and start over. Now, another crafting topic I'd like to cover is deterministic crafting. I know this is going to be an unpopular opinion, but while I understand it's a necessary mechanic to have in the game, I don't like deterministic crafting. In my opinion, it spikes player power too much, and having too many items in the game that are near perfect rolls because of deterministic crafting methods is unhealthy for the game, especially the end game. However, as I just mentioned, it is a necessary mechanic to have in the game. It's just that the current implementation of it is absolutely horrid. It's the most expensive way to craft in the game, and it's not even close. It costs 100 of divine orbs to use purple omens regularly, and that's just unrealistic for anyone who's not part of the top 0.001% of crafters. Even though I don't care for it, I think deterministic crafting should actually be more accessible to everyone. Maybe GGG should increase the drop rates of purple omens by quite a bit. However, when you use a deterministic crafting method to craft an item, you should not be able to get the best tiers of modifiers on an item. The best of the best items should be randomly god rolled into existence, and if only two absolute bis bows exist each league, then I don't see a problem with that. In my opinion, the goal of PoE isn't to have bis items, it's just to complete the game and fill in your Atlas tree. If your build is capable of doing that, then you win. You don't need to have a mirror build to do so. It's also definitely worth mentioning that I think essences need a buff. For example, I think it would be a great idea for greater essences to be how scouring orbs are reintroduced to the game. Basically, when you use a greater essence, it could re-roll the entire item and prioritize a certain modifier depending on the type of essence. Also, GGG already knows this, but expedition crafting needs a big buff. You can't even get item level 81 or 82 gear from the vendors, and that is a huge problem if you are trying to craft high-end late game gear. Now, let's move on from crafting and talk about some of the obvious additions to the game that I think most of us are expecting and hoping for in this next big patch. So we probably won't get all of this in 0.2.0, but the things we know with 100% certainty that GGG are cooking up are more classes, more ascendancies, more weapons, more gems, and acts 4, 5, and 6. I don't have a ton to add here, as this is stuff that they're obviously planning on adding to the game eventually. The question is just how much of it we are going to get in each big content patch. I'd be curious to know what you guys are hoping for the most in the upcoming 0.2.0 patch. Personally, I would really like to see the introduction of druids and swords. I'm hoping for druid because aesthetically, it's a class I'm really looking forward to. And then I'm hoping for swords because I really like them aesthetically too. And also, it would likely unlock an entire new set of melee skill gems for warriors to try out. And we all know warrior needs some love. I'm not really expecting any additional ascendancies in this next patch, other than the ones that come with any of the new classes, but I would love to see some new skill, support, and spirit gems to spice up everyone's builds and then open up some more variety across the board. As for acts 4, 5, and 6, I'd love to be optimistic and hope for at least act 4 in 0.2.0, but I feel like fixing the end game experience is just so much more important than that I would really like to see them focus on that first. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have anything to add to the conversation, then leave a comment below and get the discussion started. If you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the thumbs up and gave it a like. And as always, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on what I'm cooking up next. Peace.